In the fall of 2023, a small family went out on what seemed like a normal outing to a national park. A girl was riding her bike, surrounded by the laughter of her parents and friends. It started out as a simple adventure, but she never came back. The story began with a peaceful family picnic, but it quickly turned into a living nightmare when the girl failed to return. Everyone thought they had simply lost track of time, but the ticking clock was pointing to something far darker. The girl's relatives contacted the police, and within minutes, one of the largest search operations in New York State history was launched. No one imagined that a small clue would turn the entire investigation upside down, and that the truth would be far beyond anyone's expectations. Charlotte Sena was born on September 4, 2014, in the small town of Greenfield, nestled in the scenic landscapes of New York State. The town, with a population of just 5,000, was like a safe haven surrounded by forests, lakes, and parks, an ideal place for a child to grow up in a loving family. Charlotte, the middle of three sisters, was full of life. She loved playing with her friends and found joy in nature hikes with her parents. In September 2023, she was just 9 years old when her family decided to take a trip to a national park about 11 miles from their home. Excitement filled the air. The children prepared their bikes while the parents set up the tent as soon as they arrived. There were designated bike trails, and the kids chose the one closest to the campsite. It was 6:15 p.m. when they began their ride, planning to return before dark. But after a few laps, the story took a sharp turn. Charlotte's friends decided to head back, but she chose to go for one last ride in the opposite direction, a ride that turned out to be her last. Time passed. A single lap on that trail usually took about 5 minutes, even at a slow pace. But 10 minutes turned into 30. Worry started to grow in her parents' hearts, and the search began. They walked along the trail until they found something shocking. At 6:45 p.m., Charlotte's bike was discovered abandoned at the side of the trail. But there was no trace of her. The bike was intact, the wheels worked, the chain was in place. There was no logical explanation. She wouldn't just leave her bike and walk off into the unknown alone. Her parents called the police, and within 15 minutes, officers were at the scene. Seeing the bike alone, with no sign of the girl, triggered the worst possible fear: abduction. Still, the possibility that she had gotten lost in the woods was not ruled out. A wide-scale search operation was immediately launched. The entire park was shut down. Visitors were not allowed to leave until their tents and vehicles were searched. Some wanted to stay and help, but the chaotic situation made things harder for the police. A full sweep of the forest began, with the initial focus on the area near the bike trail, but with no success. The search was expanded to cover the entire 15-square-mile park. Authorities brought in park rangers, the fire department, state police, and even the FBI. Everyone was involved. They focused on identifying a potential kidnapper. Surveillance footage from near the park and nearby roads was reviewed. Investigators were convinced that if Charlotte had been abducted, the perpetrator must have used a vehicle. Agents requested the list of park visitors, since entry required registration and payment, meaning there were personal records for everyone who had entered. But the large number of visitors that day made verifying the list slow and exhausting. Investigators turned to mobile phone location data within the park at the time of Charlotte's disappearance. Accuracy was limited, since the tracking depended on cell towers rather than GPS. Through the night, no results came in. With the sunrise on the second day, more investigators returned to the park. Over 400 people were involved in the search. Media coverage exploded. Police made a public appeal for any information that could help. The case quickly gained attention. The governor held a press conference and announced full support for Charlotte's family. That same day, the police activated the Amber Alert system, which they had hesitated to use at first, as they initially believed the child may have just gotten lost. But by now, her disappearance seemed almost certainly to be a result of kidnapping. Time was the enemy. With every hour that passed, the chances of finding Charlotte alive were diminishing. By the evening of the second day, police began to realize how terrifyingly slim those chances were. But no one was willing to give up, not the investigators, not the family. Then, on the morning of the third day, before search teams headed out again, something strange happened. At around 4:24 a.m., a car stopped in front of Charlotte's home. A man got out and approached the mailbox. He dropped a letter inside and left quickly. There was a police officer watching the house from a distance. At first, he didn't react, assuming the man was a relative or a well-wisher, like many others who had come before. But a few seconds later, the officer grew suspicious and checked the mailbox. The letter, which at first glance looked like a message of sympathy, turned out to be the shock that changed the course of the investigation. In one of the most shocking developments, a mysterious letter bearing the kidnapper's signature appeared. He wrote that he was holding a girl named Charlotte and expressed his willingness to release her in exchange for $50,000. The letter was immediately sent to the forensic lab. Analysts raced against time to study it. While the machines worked non-stop, one expert noticed a key clue: there were multiple fingerprints on the letter. They were checked against databases, but the first attempt yielded no match. Still, hope remained. At 2:30 p.m., a second attempt was made, and this time, a match was found. The fingerprints belonged to a 47-year-old man named Craig Nelson Ross Jr., who had been in New York system since 1999 for a DUI, driving under the influence. Police didn't hesitate. Ross lived just a few miles from Charlotte's home. But when they arrived at the listed address, they faced a troubling reality. The house had been repossessed by the authorities due to unpaid property taxes. Further investigation revealed that Ross no longer lived there. Instead, he had been staying in an old camper on land owned by his mother, about 14 miles from Greenfield. Police moved quickly. They obtained a search warrant and deployed more than 30 officers supported by a helicopter. They surrounded the camper and stormed in using flash grenades. Ross tried to resist, but was quickly subdued and arrested. Inside the camper, there was no immediate sign of Charlotte. Panic began to rise. Had they arrived too late? Had she been moved elsewhere? The search didn't stop. In a tightly sealed cabinet, hidden under a pile of dirty rags, they found the girl. Charlotte was alive. As soon as she saw the rescuers, she ran to them, shaken and terrified, but alive. She was taken to the hospital, where doctors confirmed she had no life-threatening injuries. In an emotional moment, her family arrived at the hospital and were reunited with her. It wasn't just any moment, it was a rare moment of triumph and joy after days of terror. Her parents, along with hundreds who had helped in the search, were overwhelmed with relief. But there's one strange detail that can't be ignored. Less than 10 minutes before Charlotte was rescued, her mother, standing in the park's search command center, told those around her that she had a strong feeling that her daughter would return today. 10 minutes later, Charlotte was found. The phones received the life-changing call: Charlotte was safe. As for Ross, he was arrested without bail and taken to the police station for interrogation. However, since the case was still ongoing, no public details were revealed at the time. The man did not confess, which meant the case would go to court. Still, new threads began to unravel. One of his ex-girlfriends spoke to reporters and revealed that she had a restraining order against him dating back to 2017. At that time, she was living with him in his mother's house along with her 2 children, a 12-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. One night, an argument broke out. Ross attacked her and tried to strangle her, which led her to call the police. According to her statements, Ross had been planning a kidnapping for months. He didn't want to work and was always looking for ways to live off others. He exploited his mother by pretending to be ill, and out of pity, she constantly supported him financially. His ex-girlfriend said Ross didn't choose Charlotte's family randomly. Although her parents lived a modest life, her late grandfather had a large fortune. In 1998, he suffered a serious injury due to a fall and sued the city, receiving over $2 million in compensation. Even more than 20 years later, this story remained well known in Greenville. A neighbor said Ross was aware of this story and apparently decided to exploit it. Since Charlotte was abducted when she was left alone for just a few minutes, it's likely he had been watching her. According to his ex-girlfriend, he had studied the family's habits and waited for the right moment. There was another piece of evidence supporting this theory. Several months before the incident, Ross covered his trailer with a tarp, a habit he had never shown before. This sudden change might have been a sign of prior preparation. Even the neighbors had disturbing stories. One woman said Ross once tried to take her 4-year-old son, and she had to intervene. Another neighbor described his family as always problematic, saying Ross used to go around the neighborhood begging for food since he was a child. As investigations continued, more details of his dark past came to light. A year before his assault on his girlfriend, he had been arrested for stalking but was not seriously punished. The police even confirmed that just a month before Charlotte's kidnapping, he had been a suspect in a sexual assault case involving a minor relative, but the case was dropped for unknown reasons. Journalists spoke to his adult son, who didn't hide his feelings. He said openly that he hated his father and hoped he would die in prison, but gave no further details. About a month after Ross's arrest came the shocking announcement: he was charged with the sexual assault of Charlotte. The police explained that during her captivity, Ross had committed horrific acts, but they did not reveal specifics to protect the victim's privacy. Ross, for his part, denied the charge and expressed his intention to defend himself in court. Given the evidence, the situation looked grim for him. His fingerprint was found on the ransom letter, and phone data analysis from the park at the time of the kidnapping showed his phone was present there. The evidence was piling up, and his history was weighing heavily against him. With the trial set for April 2024, new concerns arose. If Ross insisted on denying the charges, Charlotte might have to testify in court and recount what happened to her, something the authorities were trying to avoid at all costs, even if it meant offering a plea deal. Eventually, he was sentenced to 47 years to life in prison for kidnapping and raping a 9-year-old girl. In a serious development, the police reopened investigations into 2 unsolved cases. In August 2003, an 18-year-old girl named Jennifer Hammond disappeared while selling magazines in the town of Milton. She had been only a few hundred meters away from Ross's house at the time. 2 years later, 19-year-old Christina White vanished from a trailer park just a mile away from Milton. A year after that, her remains were found, but the case remained cold. Now, the police are investigating whether Ross may be involved in both crimes, although no evidence has yet been publicly disclosed. Until then, one chilling question remains: how many crimes remain undiscovered? Let us know your thoughts on this story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.